to work any hard. Sorry, can you still hear me? I
I
just
can
said
hear you.
it's
Mhm.
okay. It
Colleagues,
just came up with
can
recording in progress.
colleagues
Um,
indicate that they can hear Ashley because there seems to be some variability in the sound at the moment.
okay. Well, we do recognise that. I mean, this is what our modelling and then the sense checking said was possible. But having looked at what other areas are doing, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're operating to full efficiency. But the main thing to get from this is that we are reviewing this on a day by day basis. This is part of what we're doing when the rounds come in. We're talking to them, what have you been able to do? What has caused problems? So we're looking at the capacity of the vehicles, the time to do the rounds, and this is where we can tweak. And this was always the intention, but it should have been more behind the scenes than it has turned out to be in some areas, that we could then move properties between different rounds, keeping it all on the same day so that the public wouldn't be aware of that. But we are aware from looking at that benchmarking that yes, it does look like that we've been overly ambitious. And in some areas that has proved to be the case, in other areas not. And this is where it is an iterative process, and it will continue to be because we don't wish to go through a process like this again on such a grand scale. We want to be able to do it as a gradual basis so we can monitor things on a day-to-day basis. And it varies from week to week. For example, the weeks that we've been starting early, we tried to get the message out as much as we can, but there's been less put out. The following week, we have a heavier week because people hadn't got it out early enough, or if there's, I don't know, a World Cup match on, we'll no doubt have more bottles and cans next week to pick up. And all these things are variables that we need to account, but over time. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Thank you. I'm going to move on to more questions. And thank you for your patience, colleagues, and thank you for your patience, Councillor Chloe. Floor is yours.
Thank you, no problem. Um, so I've been, our area has not been as badly affected as others. We've actually had very few missed collections, and the service has responded really quickly when we have had issues, which is so. I just wanted to make the point that we do have some very good operatives working in our waste and recycling. What I'm interested in is the impact on our vulnerable population that this route optimization might have had. And it might be that we don't have the numbers, but I think it would be useful for us to find them if we don't. So I was wondering about what proportion of the missed collections were the same properties every week, and what proportion of those are assisted collections, and then what processes we have in place for those who are digitally excluded to report missed collections, because certainly I'm aware of people who have had to report through friends and neighbours that their assisted collection was not collected. And so it would be useful to see across the county whether our vulnerable populations have been disproportionately affected by this change and what we can do in future to mitigate that or reduce that.
Thank you very much for your question.
Shall I start on that one?
Thank
I
you.
think I think Councillor Chloe is right to highlight that. Um, I know I can't put figures on it, but I know anecdotally from what has been reported to me that quite a lot of vulnerable people who would normally expect to have an assisted collection did not receive it for one reason or another. And I think that is frequently down to change in the routes and new crews who have not been aware of where those people are living. I can't put numbers on it, and I don't know whether Ashley or anybody else here can. But going forward, I think it's one of the things that we can resolve by the use of better use of digital technology in cabs so that the crews know right within the cab that the next house they're coming to may require an assisted collection. And that means that it's not just based upon information that is in a crew member's head or written on bits of paper, that it's there in the cab and therefore can be managed through these kind of changes. But putting figures on it, I can't really say. But I do hope going forward. Sorry, the other point you raised, Councillor Chloe, was around the digitally excluded, people who can't report online. People can also use the phone to report miscollections, and I know that a number of people did. Um, so I would hope that those people were able to get through by phone.
Thank you very much. Before I bring in officers, could I just supplement Councillor Chloe's question? And when officers answer Chloe's question, I'd also be interested in how much data analysis and the extent to which our vulnerable population and assisted collections, the data on that, to what extent was that factored into the modelling prior to rollout? Just sort of piggybacking on Councillor Chloe's very pertinent question. If John or Ashley could pick up where Councillor Richard left.
Thank you, Chair. And I don't want to repeat too much of what Councillor Richard's already said, but for me personally, one of the most frustrating things in this exercise were the repeated miscollections. And that's a really unfortunate matter that's occurred, and I'm aware that Councillor Gary is involved, and there has been a couple of episodes in his ward. We've very much tried to take a sort of engage with staff. How come this was give them a new map and a circle? It's going into that sort of detail, and if they still refuse to, if they still get missed, then we've had to take further action with the individuals. In terms of miscollections, and I'll allow Ashley to quantify this a bit better, perhaps. But what I think we found through this, and again, it'll be sort of anecdotal to a point, is that some of our crews, with their regular crews, of course, they live and work in their communities, and they know individuals. And if Mrs. Jones hasn't necessarily requested a assisted collection, but they've done it out of the goodness of their heart, some of those have caught us as well. So for me, it's about that. I think the major lesson learned for me is around engaging with staff. Taking out those specific local issues. And as Councillor Richard said, we need to get on now and roll out this digital in-cab. It won't be the panacea, but it will certainly help us, help the drivers, and help us with our data.
Thank you. Just on my point or my question about the extent to which intelligence on assisted collection, all of the vulnerable population was taken into account at modelling stage, yes or no?
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to defer that one to Ashley, sorry.
Okay, Ashley?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, yes, it was taken into account. I mean, in terms of the actual data, I mean, it would be difficult to say how many assisted did we miss. We were aware of all of them, and those were all put into the routes.
No, sorry, Ashley. I don't mean once it was rolled out. I mean at modelling stage.
Yes, they were
when you
put
were
in
at design stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, they would be basically put into the rounds, and that would be all part of the pack that's given to the crews every day. So yes, it would be. But as John and Councillor Richard sort of referred to, a lot of them are very local agreements, and this is where, again, going back to the engagement with the staff would have probably been helpful, because they get put behind the woodshed or just to the left of the back gate and things like that, and that is where that wouldn't necessarily be written down. They'd have to go and look for it, and with a new crew, they would have not have been familiar with it. Now, we didn't resolve that as quickly as we could have done, and this is where they were given maps and all the rest of it, but they were part of the design stage. But they're very much local issues. There's also a lot of people getting them that weren't even registered to get them, but the crews knew them. So, and just to add to that, in terms of the benchmarking with other authorities, when I have spoken to other authorities, they always raise assisted collections as something that trips them up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Chris Walsh, please.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, thank you for acknowledging the issues here and giving the apology. I think that's appreciated. And I'd also just like to put on record our thanks to the recycling teams. They do a fabulous job under difficult circumstances, and I think that needs to be mentioned. as has been mentioned, there are different perceptions of how this project has been rolled out. Because in the south, it's been less traumatic, I would say, compared to the north. But that then raises a question to me, is that when you're bringing in a major change into a service, why didn't we do this incrementally? And I just wonder whether you'd actually considered whether we'd done any impact assessments. I think it was Councillor Peat that noted before about risk assessments, but also we have to look at it from the consumer side of the equation, and the impact assessment would do that on a number of parts. One, from the public, but also then from your teams, because it's really important to engage them within any change process on the. And that then raises another question for me around project management. I'm familiar with Prince 2 project management structures because I've used that before. And within that, there are control mechanisms that you would put in place around the team dynamics and feedback in. And that starts to square your circle in that sense around on it. And then you will get issue logs in there, which would then raise things of what I've got to then address. So to me, I want to go back and get us a reflection if the service on the is, are we using those type of tools to be enabled us to get better and improve along those lines? And then finally, you mentioned about the software that you'd used, and the modernization agenda I think is really important because that ties in with sustainable powers and moving forward. But what's the validity around that software? Was it the best in the market? Had we considered anything? What were its limitations? And you know, has it delivered what you aimed to deliver with making those cost savings? I would think there's been so many challenges when we're on there. It would be difficult to be able to then justify on that. So it comes back to planning the change effectively, using effective project management, and we may not have run into some of those challenges along the way. And I'll stop there, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chris. Councillor Richard?
I think I'll pass that straight over to
the
John
team.
and Ashley to
Sure.
answer.
Thank you very much, Councillor Richard. John, Ashley? John?
I'll just start very quickly. I think to pick up on Councillor Chris's first point around rolling things out incrementally, I think that's a valid challenge. But as we've alluded to, the sort of the scale of POIST introduces its own idiosyncrasies and nuances. For example, Bilth may have rounds collected by crews from Brecon, and they may also, parts of Bilth may have rounds collected from crews from Rhayader. And then introducing a street-by-street rollout would be quite difficult in terms of communications, etc. I'll allow Ashley to sort of perhaps elaborate on that further in terms of specific operational detail. But I think to answer Councillor Chris's point around was the software the right piece of kit, etc. I think the RAP report recognises, that it didn't find any fundamental flaws in the route optimization methodology, and it did accept the principles. I do accept, and having come into this, I've been enrolled now for just under 2 years, having reviewed and reflected on this, I think one of the big things for me around this is about project managing significant areas of change. I mean, effectively, we are still collecting people's recycling and residual waste. That hasn't changed, but the way that we've gone about changing people's days, etc. I think there's a really good lesson for me across the wider HDR piece when we start doing some of these transformative changes. Thanks.
So John, from me, is it fair to interpret the answer that you just gave as there was no formal project plan and there was no formal project rollout governance in terms of planning, risk assessment, impact assessment? Was there a formal project plan and a governance arrangement to go with that or not?
There was a project plan, and I know that there was a project group. And I know Ashley will have the specific details on that. However, it's clear that the principles around that project group and the management of that is an area of focus that I need to consider and strengthen across all my service areas.
And was that project group, was it working to a clear project brief and business plan to deliver the objective that we have been searching for?
I will defer to Ashley to that, as he oversaw that part of it. Thanks.
Right. So you're deferring to a more junior member of staff. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you. Just to get, I'll try and be brief because I know time is of the essence here, but this is something that's gone on for a long time. We did a route optimization back in 2018, which went far more smoothly, with probably a lot less input than we had this time. So I think that probably made us a tad complacent in terms of how it would work. Whilst I would totally admit that the project management process could have been much tighter, there was a project team that had been working for a number of years. We had a couple of project officers working 3 or 4 years ago doing all the donkey work on it. And then there was a project team involving the area managers, myself, the data management officer, who were looking, and the communications officer as well, looking at this. And we were meeting weekly. And whilst yes, the risk registers could have been more formal, we did have a project plan that we were working to in terms of the time scale of how it was all to be implemented. And I think we possibly made a few too many assumptions, which we shouldn't have done. But there was a project team. It wasn't that we just threw it all in, let's go at all. There was a lot of process that we went through, but it's certainly a lesson to be learned that we didn't anticipate it to cause the issues that it has done. And if it had all gone as well as it had in Brecon, I doubt we'd be sat here today. But that is not, not an excuse in any way, shape, or form. In hindsight, we certainly would have done a lot more. And I think that's something that John has certainly taken on board with anything else that that he does within his wider HTR service.
Thank you very much, Ashley. I'm just about to bring Councillor Peter in, but before that, I'm just going to ask if Councillor Chris has mentioned the one project management methodology in Prince 2, that there are several. But most project implementation methodologies have someone identified as the senior responsible owner for delivery. Who was the senior responsible owner of this project? Was that written down somewhere?
It wouldn't have been as formal as that, but I was the senior manager managing those project teams.
Thank you. So the project did not have a senior responsible owner in the way that a lot of people would recognise project implementation methodology. I'm going to go to Councillor Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm hoping you can hear me okay. Okay, thank you. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Richard. I sent quite a few emails with problems that I had, and he answered fairly quickly, and they were sorted. So I'm very pleased about that. So I'll start off with a good point first. With the optimization of the routes, understanding the routes themselves, was there engagement with the staff and drivers? And I know that this was brought up by Councillor William, but I'm just interested because my second question will follow on with this. And was it led by actual officers and management? And if so, how, with the new engagement of new builds. So we've got variable time management on the new build developments that have happened all over Powys. Has there been enough time allowance for those new developments that have been adopted in the programme that they put as the optimization? Are you understanding where I'm coming from there?
I think
No.
I'll refer the question to the team. It's not something I can answer, Councillor Peter.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Councillor Peter, for your question.
Sorry, Councillor
John,
Peter.
Ashley?
Sorry, Councillor Peter. I didn't quite understand the sort of.
Okay, so
Mhm.
to start with, it was said that the actual management go round with the routes and prior to that, but we're now knowing that we've had adopted new builds, and have they been out prior to the new builds being adopted? Because that's time management that has got to be added in to the new automation of these routes. And I'm
Right.
just interested, if that's the case, has there been also a natural progression of staff leaving, retiring or whatever? And if that's the case, are new members of staff understanding the routes as the old staff did?
Okay, so I think the first point is probably around why we're having to optimize route. You know, as things change, new houses come on, developments are built, that then impacts upon the rounds. And we can go back to the original purpose. It was about rebalancing rounds as well. So where we have new developments, where there's, you know, so that was part of the purpose of it. In terms of staff come and go all the time, we do rely. You know, there's pretty much a continual advert out for HGV drivers, for example, in the waste and recycling service. That has been a real challenge for us. But staff don't just start coming to work and get given the keys. There is a training program which they go on before they're let loose onto the rounds. So it's, I mean, as Councillor Richard and Ashley has alluded to, this is an iterative process. Things will change. Staff change, you know, developments coming, you know, into being. So that's why we need to we've taken this approach. I think I've been fairly clear. I don't, for as long as I'm sat in this chair, we will not be doing a wholesale route optimization exercise again, but we will be looking at things on a more granular, detailed route by route to see where we can keep the rounds balanced. And that, again, that is the lesson for me from this rollout.
Can I just finish off with a question as well? That is there enough capacity on some of the routes to do the collection as it was, or are they actually taking that back to be dumped before it actually comes back onto site?
I'll allow Ashley to give you the specifics, but generally what happens is, and again, this is about trying to make the service more resilient. Where in the past, once the crews have done that, complete their round, they go off and tip and then come back to the yard. Now what may happen is they will have a first part of the route where they might load to 70-80% of the capacity of the vehicle, go off and tip mid-route, and then come back and do another area. So what that means is, in the past, we perhaps did an area by area route. So if we missed anything, we had to go back. It could be out until the following week. What we've tried to do as part of the methodology is perhaps in Llansillen, for example, they might be there on a Friday and a Tuesday. So if something does get missed on a Friday, they will be back on a Tuesday. So when they are working in a slightly different way than they were before, but it is about trying to keep that capacity. I don't know if Ashley wants to edit anything specifically around the operational bit of that.
Just to quickly add to it, that's all part of the route optimization, is the tipping times, so that they, you know, there's certain times on that route where they have to peel off and tip. Now it's sort of been done on a far and near basis, so they'll do the first bit of the day as far away, come back and tip that off, and then do a small amount closer to the transfer station, whichever one that may be. Now that does make it quite confusing for the public because they might see that they have vehicles collecting 3 or 4 days in that area, but that does have the added benefit that if we do miss something on a Monday, we've got something still in the area that week, rather than having to go all the way back to, I always use McConkcliffe as an example because it's a long way, rather than to having to go back just for one missed collection. So some of it doesn't look that logical, but there is a logic to it.
But it does bring the residents to sort of think that they've been left behind, and that's when we get sort of questioned as councillors.
It can do, but we are very clear in one, the initial correspondence that went out, what days they were, and the postcode checker on the website is always absolutely up to date. So if there's ever any doubt, just check that, and that will give you the day.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm just going
Thank
to
you.
pause briefly and check in with Councillor Angela to establish whether she would like to come in at this stage before I move to Pete Lewington for a further question. Angela, Councillor Angela.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I just want to go back to the points you were raising, Lynn, about there possibly not having been a clear brief business plan or risk assessment, and something that John and Ashley said there about the RAP report, and actually they're right, that it doesn't really highlight the optimisation programme as such in the RAP review. However, one of the strongest themes, just looking at it now in the review, is not the route design, it's the operational management. And they've observed things like supervisors arriving late, crews leaving depots late, the poor communication, and a lack of monitoring of the struggling round. So I'm just starting to think if many of the problems identified by RAP are relating to supervision, communication and management practices, are we focusing on the wrong thing here? And it's less about the route design and more on management oversight and operational control. Is this where we've fallen down? And I wonder if you have any comments on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Angela. Who would like to take that? John,
I'm
Matt?
happy to start that. Yeah, I mean, if you want. I think that's a really fair point, Councillor Angela. And it's really difficult without going into specifics, but we did have 2 supervisors in the north area. Unfortunately, both went on sick leave at a point where we didn't need them to. This was before rollout, so that's challenging. What came to light as part of the process was about the management as well. Again, I don't wish to be specific, but one area manager had 2 depots to look after, another area manager had a depot and a transfer station to look after, for example. Taking that on board, we could see where the weaknesses were. We've increased management presence now in that depot, so there's now basically an area manager per depot area. So what RAP have brought to the table are some really, and it's quite early, but what they have brought is a load of really good suggestions around how do we improve communications, toolbox talks, training, etc., which we will definitely all be taking on board. Ashley, I don't know whether you want to add any more to that. You're a bit closer to it.
Yeah, if I may, Chair. Just quickly on the issue, and that is a very good point, Councillor Angela, and one that we certainly recognise. We were already aware of issues in the north, and the northern councillors having missed bins and things, particularly around lorries breaking down. And a couple of summers ago, we had serious problems with recruitment. So there'll be no, there'll be no strangers to issues, if you like, in the waste management service. Now, what this did do, the route, is open up cracks, if you like, in terms of highlighting where there were issues. Just because it's been suggested that we didn't have enough, we hadn't sorted this problem out before we did the routes rollout. There were 2 supervisors up in the Abermule depot. We recruited another one at the end of last year, so there were 3 supervisors when we started the routes rollout. Just not to correct you, John, but 2 actually went off sick not long after the route started. One within a couple of weeks, nothing to do with the routes. Another one who was one that had started in January was then somewhat put in well, again, not to get into details, but they are also now off on sick. So we did struggle to cover that area. We drafted in supervisors from other depots to help out because it was basically left down to one supervisor up there who you'll probably know is a very hard worker. And we were also aware that the area management was very stretched because there was one for Brecon and one for the mid and the north. So to more align with the highways model, we have on a 12-month secondment put an additional manager in the north to balance out the workload because there was a lot to do for one area manager. So we are aware of those issues, and I think that is one of the reasons why things have improved. And we've also done some secondments of people in the Abermule depot up to the supervisor roles as well. So we're trying to cover that as much as we can. And I think the members in the north of the county will hopefully have seen some improvements over the last few weeks. One to do with things settling down, but also to do with that, which isn't necessarily route related, but it's all come at once. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Chair. So I'm just wondering, given that there were already known issues in the northern depot, whether in hindsight you recognise that should have been resolved before this was rolled out, and whether in hindsight leaving one manager over two struggling depots was sensible, given you had one manager over a depot that was performing well.
Can I just add to Councillor Angela's point? Because I think I've interpreted your answer in a similar way to Councillor Angela, that effectively you added a level of complexity and a change programme to an already known sort of underperforming and stressed operational team. So you already knew that was stressed and underperforming, and then you rolled out the programme. And I guess through a business case and a programme delivery lens, I would ask what account was therefore taken of that risk and vulnerability when judgments were being made about the ongoing rollout. Was there ever a situation where it was perhaps we should not be rolling out because we're at risk of falling over?
Can I come back, Chair, on that?
Yes, please.
So I don't know if I was quite clear that we did get additional supervisory support into the Northern Depot. We had 3 supervisors, or initially 2, and we recruited at the end of last year. So there were 3 supervisors in place for when the rollout would have happened. It wasn't until after the rollout started that 2 of them were then not able to fulfill their functions. So we did have that additional supervisory support, but then we were left somewhat in a bit of a problem that we were suddenly down to 1 supervisor, which is why we then brought them up from other depots, and we have now had seconded into it. So I think, okay, the management was something that we potentially could have addressed sooner, but we thought with the additional supervisors, we would be able to implement it. Once it was rolled out, it's not something that you can stop very easily because, of course, everybody's been given new days. So I think we did prepare for it, but probably not enough in terms of management. And it really did show where we had shortfalls there, and which is why, again, to get someone in quickly, we've done it on a 12-month secondment basis to have that additional manager.
Thanks, Ashley. I'm going to bring Councillor Pete in, but I'm going to ask Ashley a question. Ashley, when you were chairing the weekly programme, you described it as a programme group or a project group, and that met weekly, you said, and you were chairing those meetings. So you were delivering the rollout of the optimisation project. Am I right in interpreting the way you've answered your questions that you were also running this business as usual operation as well as simultaneously running the change programme part of the operation and chairing the group that was the oversight governance group? You were chairing that as well?
Yes, My
Yes.
role isn't just operations either. I mean, I'm the senior manager for waste and recycling. That covers all the contractual side, the strategy side,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
awareness
but
and enforcement, and
yeah,
operations. And then we have the area managers on the
yeah.
ground. So
Okay.
yes, that
What
wasn't at all my full-time
That's
role,
no,
far from
that's
it.
fine. What I want to establish is that you were sitting in the governance chair as well as being the person doing the doing. Because I'm just going to put it on the table that that's perhaps not best practice, but you may not have been responsible for that decision. Um, again, I think from a listening perspective, chairing this meeting, I can kind of foresee recommendations around the nature of defining a project and how it's delivered and governed through risk and impact lens, and the need for a senior responsible owner for something of this magnitude of reputational risk. In many organisations, that would be the senior responsible owner would be an executive team level person. So I think I'm kind of configuring recommendations in my head around a robust business case and robust programme delivery arrangements. And I'm going to bring Councillor Pete Lewington in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to quickly say in response to my request, just wanted to thank Ashley and Matt for voicing their apologies, and I'm sure residents will be grateful to hear that, and also to Councillor Richard for reiterating the apologies given by Powys County Council. I'll try to keep this brief, Chair. I guess for me, where I'm getting to at the moment is this was driven to save the £105,000. The focus was on using route optimization methodology to do this. As we're now starting to tease out, I think there was a lack of robust project management and risk identification, which then makes me think that the principal issues, which are set out in 2.2 of the portfolio holders report, which is namely that we weren't operational ready. Fleet resilience wasn't there, supervisory capacity and workforce adaptation weren't considered. Now, for me, as they're all pretty fundamental, I just wondered why they were not flagged up and addressed at the project stage, at the project concept stage. This is all very much using the binoculars of hindsight now.
Yes, yes, thank you, Councillor Pete. And we are in that privileged position that we have that hindsight. John or Ashley, or paragraph 2.2.
Sorry, just to come off mute there. So
Okay.
actually, I'm happy to.
Shall I go or you?
Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, those are fair points, Councillor Pete. Yes, a few too many assumptions were clearly made. One was, and this is why, in some ways, it's been a different across the board, really, in terms of like how engaged staff were. It has made a difference between the different depots. The fleet was slightly different in terms of the we were expecting to have the additional vehicles that we bought, regardless of any route optimization, in place for when we started it. Now, one of the big issues that hasn't been mentioned yet is the publicity that went out. Now, we wrote to every single household with their day change, and the question's been asked, why did you send it to houses that didn't have a day change? Well, almost everyone had some kind of change, because I think it was something like 82% did have a day change, but almost everyone may have had a change in the cycle for their 3 weekly collection. And also, in order that no one would go longer than 3 weeks, we did put in additional residual collections, and we also provided a very concise guide about how to recycle effectively at home, and all that was actually paid for by the Welsh government. But there's a very long lead-in time for that. We had to get everything ready by basically the beginning of January to be ready to go out. So we did make the assumption that the vehicles would be ready by the end of February. Now, that didn't turn out to be the case. We had a few that were supposed to be modified that weren't modified in time, and we also the vehicles which we still haven't actually had. They're these electric Roma quits, which are still due to come. We were then told that we would be able to hire these vehicles in at short notice, which we, as soon as we realised that there was an issue, we tried, and it wasn't quite as short notice as we were promised. Again, perhaps we should have put in more allowance for that, but we got them in as quickly as we possibly could to cover that. So the supervisory capacity we've already mentioned, we did think we had enough. So there has been quite a few problems that have occurred that we weren't aware of, which has sort of thrown spanners in the works of how the whole thing, has worked or not worked as well as we hoped. So I completely take what you're saying, Councillor Peter, that it would have been nice to have all that in place, and in hindsight, we would look at it in a slightly different way. But there were a few assumptions made on the basis that we had to get the publicity out, and we didn't want to leave it any later because we did want things to try and settle down before the bank holidays kicked in and we had Easter. Again, that's another discussion, but that was the intention for getting it out no later than the beginning of March.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you very much. Before I bring you in, John, can I just ask a question about project delivery? Did you have what is known in project administration world as, did you have a Gantt chart and a dependency map for this rollout?
Yes, we did have a project plan, which was a Gantt chart, which is
a dependency map.
Dependency map, no. Hand on heart, I couldn't say we had that, and the risks were more ones that were discussed in the weekly meetings rather than formed part of a risk register, which again, in hindsight, should have happened. But yes, there was a very large Gantt chart of all the different elements that had to be done, and also across all the different depots, because it was the other thing. Like I said, doing it over 3 depots makes it incredibly more complicated. So yes, we did have a Gantt chart and a project plan, but other aspects of project management could have been improved.
Thank you very much, Ashley. That's very, very, very helpful of you to describe it in that way. It sounds to me as though the critical path was driven by the fact that the communications materials had been ordered and a date set for their distribution. And I just wonder, I'm not expecting you to answer this, I'm just putting it on the table. I'm just wondering if that was actually the critical path for this project, the date that the leaflets were planned to go out. But John Brottingham, I'll bring you in.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to go back a little, if I may. I'd like to know why we are using, or have used historically, and are still using reported misses rather than actual totals. Are the actual totals not known? If they're not known, are we taking any steps to, through technology, to know what they're going to be in future? And I'd also like to just say a couple of things from my own experiences here, because I don't know any other way of putting it. But my bin collections were missed 5 times over that period. I reported them online 4 times, and I reported them verbally twice on telephone. As far as the online contacts are concerned, 3 of those are still sitting on my account as marked in progress, and that's from March and April of this year. The telephone contacts, the first one was I was 10th in the queue. The second one I was 12th in the queue. The longest time I had to wait to speak to somebody was 25 minutes. On each occasion I was promised a call back, and on neither occasion did that happen.
Sorry,
My
Chair
point
and
here,
John.
my point here is if nothing happens, then cynicism sets in, and it makes this kind of data collection less reliable.
Thank you, John.
Chair, if I could come in there and I'll expand that a bit then, John, because you've given a very personal view. I'm interested then from that operational point of view to understand, how do the service know when a round is missed or when an individual property is missed. So at what point does the depot or yourselves as manager know that's happened? Where is that recorded, and what actions are taken then to resolve that?
Can I just start off on that? Because I think I've referred to this partly before. Um, the firmest, the hardest data that we have is the reported miscollections. That's the one thing, where you have the hard data that we can look at. People who miss their collections but don't report it, it's a case of we don't know what we don't know. We do know if a crew come back from a round and say we have not been able to complete it for whatever reasons. We missed out this particular road because there was roadworks, our lorry was full, whatever is the answer. So we have that evidence. So I think that the actual missed collections inevitably is going to become more fuzzy the more you try and drive into the detail of it, and that's why it's given as an estimate. But I think John has
Okay.
highlighted the fact that people who, and I think this is particularly true in very rural areas, that people whose collection was missed once are very likely to find that it was missed again the following week and again the following week. And I think that the problems, particularly during that 2 months, and I think this is confirmed by something that you said in the chat, Angela, is that there were repeated miscollections in certain areas, which happened time and time again. But measuring them precisely, I think, is difficult. But we have a pretty good idea from what the teams tell us when they return from doing a round.
Yeah, okay, that's good. That's not quite answering what my question was. So I understand that. So if a whole estate or road or area is missed and the crew report that back, then as a councillor, I understand we often get an email to say, this has happened, we missed, and it will often say what's going to happen next. So we'll try and pick up in the morning or whatever, and the councillors can let their communities know. So that's one way of how an issue is resolved, isn't it, by communication? But I'm still trying to drill down with those individual properties, and I think we're getting a sense here across Powys that there are individuals who will report regularly, and there are some who maybe reported once and never again. But of those who reported regularly, through the correct channels, I'm trying to understand what the managerial process behind that is. So what confidence can you give us that the process is sound enough that going forward, if Mrs. A has reported her assisted collection was missed today, or Mr. B has reported his bin waste was missed today, how confident can we be that somebody is picking that up and ensuring it doesn't happen again next week? So that's a very operational question, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks, Vice Chair, for that. So as Councillor Church has said, if a crew is genuinely missed a collection, they won't know they've missed it, and then the only way we will know is if it gets reported, whether that's through the online channel or via the telephone. I think it's important to note as well.
In all due respect, John, I'm going to interrupt you because I've accepted, I don't like it, but I've accepted that some people don't report. I'm talking here about those, like the example John gave us, where people have reported.
So they come in, there's and then arrangements will be made to go back and collect, whether it's that day, like I said, if we're operating in the same area on different days, they will be picked up as part of that.
So who and how is it picked up? That's what I'm not understanding. So are we putting it on the internet or reporting it somewhere and it's just in some cyberspace, or does somebody get an alert? Where does that go? I think Ashley wants to come in there.
Ashley's trying to come in. Ashley.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, first of all, for John Broadgun, I hope you are getting a collection now, and I would like
indeed
to.
I am.
Good. Well,
the problems have been resolved, but
well, that is one thing, and apologies for that.
I'm not. I wasn't seeking a personal thing.
No, absolutely.
I was trying to make a general point about the
Okay.
what happens if somebody actually reports
Yeah.
are missing,
Yeah.
and they get nothing, and then cynicism
Okay.
gets in, and nobody reports.
Right. Well,
Ashley.
we did have a problem, and there were ones that were being reported on the system. I think do you live in the north, John?
I do.
Okay, well, that would explain that as well. With all the problems we were having, we were getting big piles of miscollections, and I would hold my hands up. They were not being addressed as they should. So an awful lot of them would have just ended up on the next round. But if they were being missed because people didn't know where they were, they would keep being missed. And this is one of the biggest things that has let us down throughout the whole process. Because in a lot of ways, we've made a lot of improvements very quickly, but it's things like this. And I know Councillor Gary Mitchell wants to speak soon. I'm sure he'll probably mention the problems he's had because that has really hit some areas that keep being missed. Now, what should happen, and we put in places a system for this now, which should have been there previously, but it was just due to the quantity. A miscollection report will come in. It is reported on the system or online. Okay, some people don't report them, but we won't be aware of that. That will then basically go to whoever's picking up the miscollections. That will then be put into the system so that hopefully there's a crew somewhere near who can go and collect that. And what we're now doing as well is that list of miscollections from that. So if there was 4 missed today, for next Wednesday's round, those 4 would be highlighted for that round and put in their pack so that when they come back in at the end of the day, one of the questions will be asked, have you covered all your miscollections? Now they've got that list and they will have had to tick them. So it shouldn't be happening time after time after time. And when we're speaking to the crews, we said, but why are you missing that? Where is the issue here? Aren't you seeing it? Are you turning in the wrong place? All those kind of things. So we do have a system in place now that it did fall over, particularly in the very busy periods particularly up in the north when we were short staffed. But that is something that we've been very, very keen to address because clearly we ask people to report miscollections. It's not like we try to massage the figures in any way by saying, oh, don't bother report it, we'll be back at some point. We want people to report it because then we do have figures that we can use. It's been said before, well, the drivers will know which uh, properties they've missed. Well, they won't because they wouldn't have missed them if they did. Now, we are looking longer term introducing in-cab technology, which will actually have that all in a system. So they will be needing to tick off areas as they do it. So that should make it much more accountable. But at the moment, it is paper-based, but we have put in systems to avoid that happening because, as I keep saying to my managers, this is the thing that is really letting us down. We may have got most other things sorted, but if there's a particular area that keeps getting missed, understandably, they're having a very, very poor service, and that gets through to members. It doesn't help us at all. So that is something on top of. Sorry, I've gone on a bit there.
Thank you very much, Ashley. Thank you,
Thank you for
Councillor
answering the
Angela
question.
and John. I'm going to bring Councillor Gary in and then Councillor Adam. I've got some questions myself that I'll follow on after Councillor Adam, but just before I bring in Councillor Gary, the question that occurs to me while we were talking about the people phoning in about missed collections and how does this relate to formal complaints, the council's formal complaints procedure, and will any of these be counted as a formal complaint and feature in the annual complaints report? That doesn't necessarily have to be answered now, but I think it is something that I would like to understand when we've had an issue quite the scale of this. How does it relate to complaints? I think we'll have a look at that. It's obviously a key responsibility of the Governance and Audit Committee is to monitor complaints and to receive an annual report. Therefore, we'll be looking for how this is addressed through that mechanism as well as this. But Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually not going to dwell too much. A lot has already been said, and yeah, I think like many others, I do feel I've had the fair share of miscollections and round issues. But what I will say, like others have, every time that I've got through to you, Ashley, or to the supervisors, they've been resolved very quickly, very efficiently. I think the frustration comes that you've had to go back week after week for the same rounds. And I know, John, you have taken it further in some cases, and I'm grateful but sad that that has to happen. I guess the things that I see, RAP have done a pretty good job at assessing and evaluating the pros and cons and the opportunities. I think one of my pleas is that we really look at that within the service delivery element. You pick up the bits that really are actionable within that, and that will just further improve. I get we're seeing improvements, absolutely do. I think for some of us, where I struggled a bit more, the letter communication in my particular ward had errors in it. So people were told there was going to be collections on certain days, and actually there wasn't, and there was never a plan to be on that day. It was that lack of rechecking, I suppose, and the ability of those print runs to get that right. So I had numerous minor roads that were going to receive a completely different collection day to what the letters said, and that just obviously instantly causes angst and frustration and a missed week straight away. And if it was a residual week, it actually meant a 3-week delay. So a few issues around that, John. I take comfort in you saying we're not going to do a wholesale one again, and therefore you've got more ability to pin down those nuances before it goes live. But I think where we've highlighted to you is certainly that call center issue of when they're reported, the lack of confidence that actually that gets through to the system and gets resolved, and communication back to residents, because it does say still on the system, we'll call you back. Not one of my residents ever had a call back, and I doubt there was ever time to do it. So let's drop that messaging. I think what I'm now seeing, sadly, is an impact on the commercial collections in my ward, and I don't put them through to the usual suspects because it's a completely different space. But actually, I wonder whether it could or should have been the same teams collecting the commercial waste as well in my rural rounds, because it's commercial waste that are now being missed on the rural round location. So perhaps, Ashley, I'll pick that up with you and the team, because I'm getting no joy whatsoever from the commercial collections team. And I ended up driving to an elderly resident's commercial property, filling my own camper van with stinky 6-week-old waste and dropping it off at Abermule. Very gratefully received at Abermule by the team there, but an absolute waste of my time. What I do think we also need is a little bit of blue sky thinking that I'm just not sure was out there before the route optimization. And that's one thing, again, I'll perhaps push you to think of, that if we're doing continual reviews, I personally, let's get rid of Monday collections and let's use Mondays to mop up, to get bins out there when they're requested, and not have it a regular collection day, and increase those hours, get them out of that rush hour traffic that RAP have suggested. Because if bank holidays are still causing us frustration, let's drop collecting on a Monday. I know you'll say, oh, it's not that simple. Of course it isn't. You'd have to double rounds elsewhere and you'd have to move teams around, but it is possible. And I just don't think we've done that sort of deep dive ahead of it. We've programmed stuff in a computer and the computer said, do X, Y, Z. But I do find it odd that within 100 meters of each other in my ward, I've got 2 different collection days and 2 different depots collecting certain areas. And to anyone in the local community, that just doesn't make sense. And when you try and explain it to people, I struggle. I can't say why I've got 2 different depots collecting, but because I don't know that nuanced stuff behind it. So for me, I appreciate what's been done to rectify the issues. Things have settled down, most definitely, but I do think we need to look at that contact issue. If you report a problem, does it get resolved and on the system, and is there feedback to the customers that have reported it? And also, yeah, is there a knock-on impact that we're now just starting to see in the commercial collections team or not? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gary. Matt, do you want to come in first and then, yeah?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It covers some of the points, but not all of it. But I think it also covers some of the issues that you raised earlier, Chair, in terms of project management issues. But some of the points that were just raised now in terms of customer calls and complaints, just to give everybody assurance on the call, we have set up an HTR transformation board within John's area. John is myself and John are leading on that, not just for waste and recycling, but it's just to give you that assurance that on the back of this is clear now. Project management principles are key in terms of us delivering big scale change, and within that transformation program, digital and data is within it. Customer and communication, so that picks up some of the points that were just raised in terms of missed collections, performance and value for money. That's another part that we'll be looking at. Health and safety, workforce culture and supervision, procurement and commercial. So these are essential items that we're going to take forward now as part of the HCR transformation program. And also the principles around project management is something that myself, John and Ashley will take back for ourselves and the wider teams, ensuring that that we are familiar with the Prince2 principles or other APM, project management principles that we will ensure that are taken forward. But just to give you that, that assurance, Chair, that we are taking those steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Thank you. Thank you very much for those assurances. I'm going to go to Councillor Adam now for questions. Then I'm going to jump in with some questions that I have myself, and then I'll go to Councillor Pete Lewington. I've got my eye on the clock as well, colleagues. It's 20 to 4, and we need to allow sufficient time to kind of take stock of where our conversations have got us to perhaps plug any gaps in questioning that we identify and come up with an agreed set of formal recommendations. So if with that in mind, could you think about things that we may not have covered at all? And I will bring Councillor Adam in.
Thank you, Chair. And if it's okay, can I ask one question then and come back, if that's all right with you. An observation, by the way, somebody touched on it. We're doing this in hindsight. I think that is a significantly important point to clock, that probably this is no way to supervise and support and govern and get things right, to do things through after the event scrutiny. I think in link to that, it's a clear observation that, and I am reading between the lines from some of the answers we've been given, that we have got a project management group, but it feels like it is one-dimensional when it needs to be four-dimensional. So the one dimension is it's quite clearly got the professional officers in the heart of it. The three dimensions, I suspect it is missing. It is missing strategy and oversight that comes from both the political and the executive element. It's missing the external stuff that we now see RAP giving. And I think had that been there from day one, we'd have been a different ball game. And I think it's missing the co-design elements that Councillor William touched on from the operational team, and indeed RAP touched on. So I think I'm leading that through to a recommendation that says it feels to me that there ought to be something which is about four-dimensional co-production here without getting in the way of the actual operational need. So I had a point. It feels to me that over and above this post-event scrutiny, significant service changes should have far greater governance and oversight applied to them from the early stages. And this is a PCC-wide issue, by the way. This is not a note to this particular team, Ashley, or to the sector, John. I think it's a PCC-wide one. And we currently do make use of advisory boards in terms of budget advisory group and farm estate advisory group. And I just think there's a constitutional question to ask ourselves about whether we are structured appropriately. I have one question, and I'll come back with a second one if you may. I have a lot of sympathy, Ashley. As you know, I did not route review. Mine was very small and very easy, and mine was hard enough. I have no problem whatsoever in the justification of a route review on the grounds that you gave, Ashley. I do have a problem in justifying on the grounds of saving money. So I fully acknowledge and accept we do need to do it, but for operational reasons, growing population, etc. But I do think it ought to have been overtly stated and signed off in a project management way. I think, Lynn, you talked about the brief. I'm not going to dwell on these two big factors that were known in advance, but probably not managed because we didn't have a risk register, which is fleet and staffing, particularly in the north. I just want to identify that in the north, it struck me that there are two elements to staffing from reading the papers and listening. One is the managerial side, where the attempt was made to put the supervisors in, but no backup plan was there for when that fell over. Not that you were expecting it to, but actually also in the operational side, because we know it's harder to get crews onto bank holidays in the north. I just think all of that would have been picked up in a four-dimensional project planned, risk assessed setup. And these things would have been avoided. The one I wanted to ask about that it feels to me that we could have avoided is about the timings of when we introduced it. And there might be a very simple answer. So this is my first question, if I may. We run our rounds in three weekly cycles, largely. Therefore, to get any learning in and get any corrections in, we need at least one, if not two. We only had 5 weeks from implementation to Easter. Easter being a double bank holiday, double the difficulty. So I just wonder why we only ran for 5 weeks, i.e. 1 2/3 cycle, and why we didn't either start this in February and give ourselves 2, if not 3 cycles, or do it in June, July when we've got a much clearer run. Is there a reason why we chose to do it in the run-up to Easter? That's my first question. If I may, I'll come back with a second one afterwards, Lynn.
Thank you, Councillor Adam, and thank you for your remarks about project management, etc. That was actually very helpful for us thinking about our recommendations. John, to answer the specific question about the timing, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, timing it's a really good question. 6 weeks, whatever, 5 weeks was it till Easter? We could have, with the benefit of hindsight, we could have delayed it. Had we delayed it till after Easter, we got another 2 weekends in May. Had we delayed it in May, we got another bank holiday coming up in August, and there may be an extra bank holiday in August should England win a football match. But then when we start to go into September, October, as I believe, and I'm sure Ashley will correct me if I'm wrong, we did the last implementation, we get struck with sort of potential bad weather issues or storms, etc. So there is never a good time. Hence perhaps my reassurance that I don't think that we will do this again in this format. I'm noting your point around the project management. I think Matt's covered off at that point around the governance and assurance of future change projects. So timing, there's never a good time. For the benefit of hindsight, would we have done any different? Probably, but like I say, it was March for a number of reasons, probably around getting the literature out, etc., and having a bit of space, like you say, to iron out any significant problems.
But John, sorry, Adam, to cut across you, but saying it was March because we had to get the literature out is a bit back to front. The date that you decided to start would be the date which determined when you were getting the literature out. So I think you've explained to Councillor Adam and to the Joint Committee why you didn't choose all the other dates, but you haven't really explained why you did choose the date you chose.
I can't give you a rationale. That was the date, and that then informed when we sent out the correspondence, and then that set the sort of train in motion to go live with the routes on the 2nd of March.
So the correspondence, as we kind of alluded to earlier, the date, the printing of the publicity materials and the correspondence was driving the launch date of the programme, notwithstanding the fact that you knew there were risks around vehicle availability and operational performance already. Right. Councillor Adam, you had your hand up again, I think.
Yeah, and I suppose there's a bit. I think Matt, you also alluded to this idea that this had all authorities suffer from this, and there's never a good time. I sort of don't really buy those as sort of answers to what are sort of fundamental questions, because that's a sort of a fait accompli approach. Well, we might just do anything. I suppose to round this off and then move on to my second question is I think a number of things would have been raised and resolved had there been that four-dimensional challenge and input. So I'm not trying to go back and unpick. I just think I think we had two inherited problems here of fleet and people, and then we chose one of our own, which was to do it just in the run up to Easter. So that what I feel slightly self-inflicted. But all of those would have been aired and talked through, and rationales given if there'd been a four-dimensional look at this. Which slightly leads to my second question, if I may. I'm curious about why we as an authority have adopted sustainable Paris principles, which talk very much about co-production, co-creation, evidence in advance, engaging with residents on solutions, and that we have not applied it to this or indeed to many other areas of our work. Is there a reason why we did not have a sustainable Paris co-production engagement plan attached to this?
Thank you very much, Adam. That's an extremely helpful question, Councillor Adam. Would someone like to take that? Angela, I can see your hands up. Do you want to interject now? No, okay, thank you. Councillor Richard or Matt or John to answer Councillor Adam's question about sustainable powers.
I think Councillor Adam makes a valid point. And Councillor Adam mentioned around about whether we should be scrutinising things in hindsight to for that around this performance. Nobody wants to be in here answering these type of questions. I certainly don't. However, it is really valuable for me as a head of service to take these lessons away and pulling out what scrutiny have said. So I can't give you a specific answer around why it hasn't been done, but it will be done. As part of our wider HDR transformation, we need to change how we deliver services across HDR. This exercise, whilst I acknowledge and I am deeply sorry for the inconvenience this has caused, if there is a silver lining to this very dark cloud, there's a lot of learning that I will take and the service will take across wider implementations. And I think Councillor has made a really good point around the sustainable powers principles not being applied in this case. Thank you.
But Adam, last word, please, on this.
Absolutely, I think John would absolutely agree. I don't think any of us want to be in this conversation. I suppose what I would say is, can we either dispose of our sustainable powers principles or apply them as my recommendation? Because I think we've adopted them and then never used them, and I think that is something probably sorry, John, above your pay grade. I think that's for the portfolio holders here to, past and present. Or present and past, to answer as to why we didn't apply the very principles we adopted 4 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. We'll look at that for the recommendations list for strategic and operational consistency reasons. I'm going to take Chair's prerogative here. My hand hasn't been up, but I do have myself on the list. Listening to the conversation, I am even more focused than I was hitherto on the need for a proper, what I would describe as a proper project brief based on a business case, and adopting good practice, which is widely known and widely used in the public sector. I would thoroughly recommend use of the 5-case business case model, which would require you to set out a business plan which has a strategic case, an economic case, a financial case, a commercial case, and a management case. And I would suggest that had that been done, it may not have been perfect. Typically complex projects still encounter issues, but had that been done, we as a council may have been more acutely aware of the potential pitfalls, and you may have made, as a delivery team, you may have had the opportunity to make slightly different decisions as to timing and what deadlines were driving your agenda. You may have found that driving your agenda by the date that you were having letters printed for maybe wasn't your critical path. So a good project brief supported by a robust business case would be a recommendation that I would be encouraging the joint committees to think about. And then, as we've already discussed, thanks to several colleagues, once that project brief and business case have been approved through formal governance, that there is then a robust approach to project management wrapped around the delivery, which does not involve someone in Ashley's position where he seems to have been doing the doing and chairing the board, because that kind of obscures accountability. However, as well as those items, I also want to just record my I can't understand, or I'm not finding in the report and the paper that we were provided with for today, I'm not able to understand the financial model and the budgetary implications of the proposed change, and in relation to the 105,000 saving that was identified some 5 years ago. I'm not really understanding its subsequent relationship to the grant that was awarded more recently. So I'm not really understanding the paper as far as the financial model underpinning this change, and the financial model for the change, its relationship to the wider departmental budgets. I'm looking at paragraph 3.6, which says this has enabled the service to refocus the purpose of route optimisation towards supporting a more resilient, high-performing service rather than purely a financial saving. Fine, because I think earlier discussion suggests that part of the original impetus was to make a saving. But I think I would like to actually see some detail around that, how that actually manifests in the numbers. And then I'm looking at paragraph 9.2, which the final sentence of which is, this has increased the overall cost base of the service. So I guess I have a question about the increased cost base, the increase to the cost base of the overall service, to know if that is a recurrent increase, and to know that as a consequence of the situation that arose where the problems all started to materialise and you had to get in additional supervisors and source more vehicles and whatnot, what is the net addition in terms of costs for the recovery from the situation? How much more has that cost than was originally planned? And how much of those additional costs are recurrent, and what proportion is recurrent and what proportion of those costs are non-recurrent? Because I think from a GAC perspective, and GAC has the responsibility to understand how the finances of the council are governed and controlled and to provide assurance on them. We need to see, and I know we're not going to get it for this meeting, but I do think we'll have to have it after this meeting, a much more acute understanding of the money movements and the budgetary implications, both short-term and long-term, for this, because quite frankly, the paper doesn't actually tell us anything about the budgets and the finance. And so that is a matter of some concern.
Thank you.
Those are my kind of points and questions that I've been holding on to.
I think, Chair, if I can respond to that.
Thank you, Councillor Richard.
Initially, I think that the 105,000 annual saving to the service from the review still stands. It is supported, as I understand it, by grants that we get from the extended producer responsibility, and I think Ashley or John will be able to explain that more clearly. It's my understanding is that the costs to recover the situation that arose after the rollout of the optimization of routes are not ongoing costs. They're costs connected with that immediate recovery. And some of those are also offset by the delay in the supply of the new vehicles, which means that the depreciation costs associated with those purchases have not yet kicked in. But I appreciate that you need actual figures on these, and I think that we need to supply those to you at a future date.
Thank you very much, Councillor Richard. That's very much appreciated. When that additional information comes, it would be helpful to understand how the 105,000 plays into the wider savings plan for HTR as a budget line. And I'm not necessarily expecting Jane or Mary to come in and answer now, but I'm also aware that HTR has had almost 250,000 of its cost reductions written out of its budget for 25-26. And so from a strategic finance perspective, I'd quite like to understand if there is a relationship between the financial model for this change programme, albeit the savings and the changes are mostly 26-27, but how does that relate to the overall budget and financial management that enabled that required HTR to have almost £250,000 of its cost reductions written out of the budget? There's just bits of information around the finances and the budgeting of this space that I've got from various sources, and I would like Jane and Mary, I would like advice going forward as to how this all fits together, because it just doesn't feel very transparent at the moment.
I think that's understood, and I think the team within HTR themselves are still waiting for some of that financial information to come through for the current financial year. I can see Mary is on the meeting. I don't know whether she can add anything to that now.
Mary, is there anything you want to add, or the additional information can come to both committees acting jointly?
Yeah, more than happy to provide additional information in the future, but I can see Jane's got her hand up as well.
Jane, right, okay. Jane, I can see you now. You're on my top row, Jane.
I was just going to say, yes, we can commit to provide that information. So we can work with the service and pull that together for a future meeting of probably a scrutiny committee. I think is probably the most appropriate means, and whether you attend again for that when we can provide it. We'll agree timelines and that outside of the meeting if that's okay, but we can come back with that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, right. I'm going to move to Angela. Do you want to come in? I'll ask Councillor. Are you okay? I'll move to Councillor Pete Lewington, and I'll make Councillor Pete Lewington's formal question the last formal question, and then I'll ask Councillor Angela, if she's got any remarks to start to draw things together, and then I think we'll move on to formally record our recommendations. Angela, are you okay with that? Fine. Councillor Pete Lewington.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a very quick one. 3.4 in the portfolio holders report mentions that there were long-standing variations in how rounds operate across the service. I just wondered if there could be a bit more explanation of what the long-standing variances were, and also confirmation that they've now been addressed.
Thank you, Councillor Pete. Ashley?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, that's a very easy one to address. What the long-standing variations is that essentially there were some crews getting back at midday and other ones getting back at 4 o'clock on different rounds, and it was to balance all that out. So that was one of the big things about the whole route optimization, that there were crews finishing very early, some are quicker than others, and there were some finishing late, which wasn't fair on those crews. So it's to balance those rounds out.
Chair, could I just ask a quick supplementary?
Yes, Pete.
Understand that. Yeah, thank you, Ashley. I just wonder, therefore, why were they allowed to become long-standing? What sort of time period is long-standing? Why weren't they sorted out before?
Because it takes a long time to sort out routes, essentially, and we've been doing this for quite a few years, really. And we did try and get those crews back out doing things where they could, but that's always a challenge if there's not the vehicles and all the rest of it. So yes, the whole thing has gone on longer than we would have hoped in both the pre-planning and since.
Thank you, Councillor Pete, for your question. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you. Councillor Angela.
Thank you very much, Lynn. So sort of just trying to get my head round and bring this back to the beginning of where we started. I think I really support what you're saying, that we really need in future for any major project redesign, we need to have clearer real purpose as to why we're doing these things. We need to have a better project brief, a business plan, and some sound risk or impact estate assessments. And I think that it is possible that they were missing in this case. However, to be fair, RAP don't identify the route design as being the issue. And Ashley and John, I think, have given us some really clear assurance that they were aware of those issues in the north and in the mid region, and we've had it explained to us how much smoother things have gone in the south. So actually it was possible to roll this out, and indeed in the council we have rolled it out in one area. So if we listen to Meatloaf, who sang 2 out of 3 ain't bad, that would be fine, but we haven't. We've got 1 out of 3. So 1 out of 3 by my singing a song in my head is pretty poor, isn't it? And I think we do have to recognise that this has brought some reputational damage to the council. It has really frustrated our residents. Appreciate it's only 5% of those 71,000, so that's still 3,500 households who've experienced known missed collections. So it really isn't good enough. And RAP did identify that management and operation control had a big impact to play on this. So I think it's probably worthwhile that, with your permission, Lynn, we go to some recommendations, because I think what's really important now we've had this session is to think about where we go from here, how we put this right, and how we ensure that this sort of thing doesn't happen again. And I think Ashley and John are probably fully on board with that premise. So yeah, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, agreed, Councillor Angela. I think we should move formally to agenda item 5 and examine our emerging recommendations and agree them for forwarding. Yeah, okay. Can the Secretariat team help us with the bringing together our recommendations?
Chair, they are in the chat.
They're in the chat, right? Okay, I've not got my chat open. I can see them, right? Okay, can everyone see the recommendations in the chat? So we have.
So for Chair, if you could run through them,
yes.
and then the committee can decide, are they going to accept? So if you run through each one and possibly make sure that you've got acceptance from the committee as a whole.
Yeah.
And then add any others. But obviously these are just from the discussion. These are what we're sort of putting as possible.
Thank you. Thanks, Kath. Right. So we've got the first one, which is major service change or formally require a project brief and a business case in line with best practice, 5-case business model. which references impacts, risks, dependencies, delivery approach. Then once that's approved, it goes into formal governance and is delivered through a project methodology. I'm paraphrasing here, you can all read it for yourselves.
Yeah.
With clear accountabilities. Are we in agreement that we have a recommendation like that? Yep. Kath, is that okay?
Yes, Chair.
Okay. Then we move on to number 2, which is future merger service transformations and redesign should adopt a co-design approach, similar to that undertaken for the Grow Powys strategy, ensuring meaningful involvement with elected members, residents, etc. I'm wondering, without having looked at the rest in detail, I'll bring you in, Adam and Gareth. I'm just wondering if in number 2 there would be the place to bring in what Councillor Adam was saying about sustainable Powys principles.
Yeah.
That might be the place, because it's the same sort of yeah. Gareth Hall, do you have something to add as well?
Yeah, just in that first recommendation, agree with it all, but I would add a couple of things. It shouldn't be limited to major service area changes, but major projects.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think also, going back to what was said about 4 dimensions, is that these principles should be applied not just within this service area, but across the council as I would say, as standard operating procedures.
Yes.
And there's one of the 4, I don't know which of the 4 dimensions are, but one of them is a multidisciplinary approach, whereby this would have been helped by having communications expertise sitting on the group,
on the board, if there was a board,
about the engagement with the public and expertise in engaging with staff, particularly at the sharp end. So, and I think there needs to be acknowledgement of professional project management input.
Yes, definitely.
I've come across it in my past lives, and you don't have to know about refuse collection to make a very substantial project management input. In fact, by having project management expertise which doesn't know about the problem, brings objectivity and keeps on asking those fundamental questions.
Couldn't agree more, Gareth, because that would probably have made Ashley's life a lot easier, because he would be the guy who knows the stuff, without being too pejorative, but have a professional expert in project management sitting alongside him doing the project.
Yeah.
But while Ashley brings the expertise, is the more typical model. If are people content? Are members content with the edits that Gareth is suggesting to number 1? Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Adam.
I suppose just on the oversight to comment 1, just to try and find somewhere to say that I think a lot of what we've been looking at today reveals, council-wide issues. So somewhere to try and make the point that the recommendations are for the whole council, not just for, on 2, which I think, yes, you could take out the bit which is about the Grow Power strategy. I don't think I mentioned that. I didn't know where it came from, because I'm not sure that followed sustainable powers principles. But I think it would be to say from the early stages, as defined by our sustainable powers principles, ensuring meaningful blah blah blah. And I suppose a little bullet at the end would be, my recommendation is to fully and professionally adopt the sustainable powers principles, or to remove them. I think it's clear that we have them but don't follow them, and I think that needs to be made clear, if we could, please.
Yeah, thank you. And are colleagues in agreement with Councillor Adams' point about sustainable powers principles?
Yes, I am, Chair, but I just want to come in. It's unfair to say Powys doesn't do this, because it absolutely does. And we've had some excellent project work that's gone on with stakeholder involvement that's resulted in a fantastic resource strategy that actually Ashley led on himself, a Grow Powys strategy, a leisure review, and a net zero report that have been really positive pieces of work that have had huge amount of involvement from stakeholders and scrutiny. And I think that's where this has fallen down, isn't it? That there hasn't been any.
So it's about consistent use of that approach.
Could I just challenge slightly? It's not that we don't do good stuff, and I'll put my hand in there. It's my opinion. I think the Grow Power strategy, as our economic strategy, is good as far as it goes, but I absolutely don't think it followed our sustainable powers principles. It did a certain amount of engagement, but that isn't what our sustainable powers principles say. So it's just about being putting those at the heart of everything we do as a council, having adopted as a principle or not doing it at all, or not having them.
Are we content to make that point? Recommendation.
I can suggest you might not want to make the one that says don't do them at all.
Yeah, obviously.
But I'd like to stick with one that says can we please follow the principles that we have adopted?
Yeah.
In full.
Chair, if I could interject. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead. Is that Gemma?
It is. We have formulated a recommendation based on your point around the sustainable powers principles, Councillor Adam, which is number 7.
Right.
And I believe recommendation 2 was formulated out of the comments at the top of the meeting from Councillor William Powell, Councillor Angela. So we've tried to kind of build
a slightly different point.
We've gone through. So it may be worth kind of looking at them as a whole and looking at how you want to adopt them, because we may be changing one and actually then coming to a recommendation that says a similar thing further down.
Thanks, Gemma. I've probably confused matters there, so apologies, colleagues. So are we content with number 2 as it stands?
Can this be verbalised for the public, please?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, sorry, Kath. Number 2 is future major service transformation and design projects should adopt a co-design approach from the earliest stages, similar to that undertaken in the Growth Power strategy, ensuring meaningful involvement of officers, frontline operatives, elected members, residents and service users. Engagement should be used to test assumptions, identify operational risks, capture local knowledge and shape implementation plans before decisions are finalised. Yes, we're content with that as a recommendation.
Chair, I'm very happy to endorse that.
Thank you.
Obviously, it was part of my contribution seems to have been drawn on here, and also I need to give my apologies because I need to step out at this stage, which is rather frustrating. But it's just another commitment that cuts across.
Thank you.
So,
thank you
very much
William.
indeed.
Thank you. And I can also see that the leader's hand is up, and I can also see that Councillor Chris's hand is up. So, but I'll go to the leader who has been with us all afternoon, and I'll give him the opportunity.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm just a bit concerned about the tone that has now changed within the meeting, and in particular, I'm looking at point 7 that is there, and the emphasis is on Cabinet applying sustainable powers principles, and every Cabinet paper that Cabinet considers sets out sustainable powers principles. I've got them open in front of me. I can read them to you if you're not familiar with them yourselves. What we see here is an operational exercise that you have concluded did not follow sustainable powers principles. The operational exercise was just that. It wasn't overseen. Councillors have suggested in this discussion that perhaps it should have been overseen in a way, but it's an operational matter, was not overseen by Cabinet or portfolio holders because it arose out of a decision taken historically to make a saving in a budget line, which resulted in these operational changes. So I'm not content that you say that Cabinet needs to apply this, because actually I think your concern is that operationally we should ensure that we are applying the principles in all that we do. And I'm perfectly happy to accept that. But I think Cabinet is applying that, and all the reports we receive and the decisions we make are based on those principles.
Thank you, Councillor Drake. Thank you, Leader. As a recommendation, how do members of the committees receive the Leader's response to that? And I do understand what Councillor Drake is saying.
Can we just say the council as a whole should?
Yeah, the council as a whole should. I think yes, I think that's a really good idea, Councillor Adam. I think my interpretation of the challenge with this particular issue, in as much as the genesis being an operational matter, which was sort of initiated because of the 5 years ago 105,000 budget target, as well as growing population and new houses, etc., is that whilst it was an operational matter and in many respects is characteristic of an operational matter, the scale of the potential the potential reputational risk to the whole council of getting an operational matter like this wrong was always going to be huge. And I would suggest that senior managers in the relevant service ought to have realised that the reputational damage of not managing this operational matter effectively was high, and therefore even when things are operational, I would suggest that they still need a high level of attention and very deliberative approaches to a change, an approach to change and a change model. But that's my sense of where we are. On number 7, Adam has suggested that recommendation, which is around applying the sustainable powers principles, that to acknowledge the Leader's comments that we don't say Cabinet in that recommendation 7, that we would say Powys County Council. Are members content with that? I'm seeing some nods.
Yeah.
Chair.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hands. Councillor Angela.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. I just think we're overcomplicating this. So to go back to my closing comments, Ashley and John have recognised there were operational issues. RAP tell us that there were management and operational issues. We've identified that there did need to be a better business case and risk assessment, so some better governance up front. But equally, the fact that they have rolled this out in the one depot in the one region shows that the plan could and should have worked. So I think we're overcomplicating that. And the thing for me here is perhaps we should be strengthening, a recommendation should be asking to strengthen that management and operation within the service. Yeah. And then it's number 5 is the key thing there, that when things have gone wrong, that we need reassurance from the service that they are recording, managing and dealing with that correctly. And I think those would be recommendations more relevant to the paper before us today, rather than trying to maybe in this session fix the whole council, which isn't what we're here to do today, is it?
Yeah, so number 5, focusing on your point is...
So the first point being, before we introduce the new project, having those project management, that clear aim and ambition, what the outcome is going to be, that risk assessment, and then we roll it out, and this is what we do to ensure to keep it on track.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to read out number 5 because it's quite important, and we do need to be reading these out for the public record. And it picks up Councillor Angela's point about the service. So a recommendation could be that the service strengthens its missed collection management, missed collection management, communications, and customer contact arrangements by ensuring that all missed collections are recorded consistently, repeat missed collections are identified, monitored, and investigated. Actions taken are tracked through to resolution. Vulnerable and assisted collection households receive appropriate prioritisation. Residents receive timely and accurate updates on the status of their reports. Customer-facing communications and reporting systems accurately reflect service being provided, and performance data is regularly reviewed to identify trends and prevent recurring failures. That feels to me as quite a strong recommendation, directly relevant to the service issues that have been encountered. Our colleagues' content.
Chair, could I just come in with a quick comment, please? Sorry.
Quick comment, Pete.
Yeah. It's just I was listening to Ashley's comment earlier on about having comparable data, and I'm beginning to think that obviously if you're using a report from the system of a miscollection, as long as that's all detailed correctly, then that's fine to use as comparable. But what do we do about this other anecdotal stuff, like councillors bringing in reports of miscollections, social media? So it's almost, do we need a definition of what a reported miscollection is? And that is only one that goes on the system, because we don't want to make an industry out of this, and I'm not sure we're ever going to record all miscollections.
How do we,
make sense?
So is that how do we formally identify a missed collection?
Yeah, or a definition of miscollection, and that could be just something as simple as one that is reported on the system.
Ashley, is that something you've got already?
Sorry, I was just finding the mute button. Well, as we discussed previously, it's a very difficult one to do because when we mention things like social media, we have to be very, very careful what is put on there. We have those reported miscollections. We encourage residents to report it online or through the help desk. So we do encourage people to do that. So I think it is the only comparable figure we're really going to get. It is basically what every other authority does. Yeah. And in terms of what we get from councillors, it's hard to actually judge that. But before I came into this meeting, I did just, because I got a file purely for councillor contact, and I was looking about the number of emails I'd had over the past few months, and it has just got to a very high level and then dropped off hugely. But I'm not sure that is, different officers will get emails from councillors. Yeah. Councillor Richard Church will get emails from councillors. And I think what we have got is the miscollection report. We have our own data in terms of whether rounds have completed or not, and that is something that isn't dependent on someone reporting it. So we do have a huge amount of data, and we've got it by depot, we've got it by week. So there's so much data that we do have. And as you correctly said earlier on, we've got the complaints as well. So if it comes to an issue where people really aren't getting it resolved, they put in a complaint. They can then be resolved at stage 1. If they're not, they become stage 2. So we've got all that data that's already there, but it is very, very difficult to use anecdotal stuff, unfortunately. Yeah, so I think there's an awful lot there that we can use, and it is it does reflect what's going on.
It also seems to be important that your definition of a reported miss is consistent over time and is defined in a way that's comparable with other authorities as well, so that we have a consistent time series. Yeah, and consistent benchmarks.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's another point to mention as well, that every single reported miscollection may not be a miscollection. We have quite a few that we get a reported miscollection and they just haven't got there yet, or it's got, we've said we're going to be late and they've already reported it. They may have put the bin out too late and it's not collected, and that's all part of our curbside collection policy, but that goes down as a miscollection, and we're trying to cleanse that data so there is genuine ones that we've missed, and not because the public hasn't put their bin out or they've just reported it before they've even got there, because they normally get there at 10 kind of thing.
Okay. Chair, sorry, Chair. So could we just add to our recommendation that the service, Ashley, whatever comes up with the definition of a reported miscollection. And then if we're all agreed
to
on
recommendation 5 that I just read out, yeah.
Rather than try and resolve it now.
Yeah, I think so, because we're definitely not going to resolve it now.
Yeah.
I think we can we add that the service has a definition that it applies consistently.
Yeah, and yes, I agree. And it would be nice to say to know what that definition is, so
Yes.
we don't then come back with, oh well, we know councillors have done this. We know they're not included anymore.
Yeah. What's in and what's out of that definition. Yeah.
To be fair, Chair, it does say that all miscollections are recorded consistently. And I think that's what we're saying there. It already says that. So for me, from ERC, that is the most crucial recommendation. And moving on to the next one, I'm not sure that I agree that the service need to consider alternative operating models purely on the basis the model is working in the south of the county. So really, we just need to make sure we roll it out more smoothly across the rest of the county, don't we?
Yeah, I'm not convinced by number 6, the drafting in number 6. Remove, Councillor Angela, will we remove number 6?
Well, I'm just looking at it. Just reword it quick. Oh, sorry, I've lost my page.
That the service
I think we do want to. Sorry. I'm trying to read Gemma's message at the same time. Bear with me a second, sorry.
Including the potential for dedicated.
Oh, yes. So this came out of the idea that I think it was Councillor Peake said about making a Monday a catch-up day rather than a collection day, which may help dealing with wrap-ups, sweep-ups and bank holidays. So I think that's what this means by alternative operating models, alternative days, not changing the whole system. So sorry, I overcomplicated that, but yeah, Ashley has got his hand up. Sorry, Chair.
It was Councillor Gary, Angela.
Oh, there we are. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just a wee bit.
I'm reluctant for us as scrutiny to make operational decisions for a department of the council.
Yeah, it just feels a wee bit too managerial. Do you know? Yeah. Anyway, John and Ashley both we're kind of over time, colleagues, so that's why I sound a bit hasty. But Ashley and John.
I'll let John go first.
Very quickly, Chair. It's not for me to make recommendations, but just an observation. Councillor Angela did make the observation around our pass rate being high, etc. So if we condense the collections, it's going to add to that because we're trying to squeeze 5 days into 4 effectively.
Yeah.
So that, like I said, it's not for me to make recommendations. It's just an observation.
Yeah. Thanks for that observation.
Chair, I'm going to suggest we get rid of that
5. Yeah. It feels very management discretion kind of thing, doesn't it? Yeah. Removed. Yeah. Okay. So the ones we haven't looked at, we've looked at 7, and that was the one around Councillor Adams' comments on sustainable powers, which and the leader has given us his assurance that it is very much on the cabinet's.
And I do think that the issue about the project brief, the business case and the oversight is covered by number 1. So I don't know really whether 7 is really just repeating number 1 in different words.
In different words. So 7 could be changed to pick up what Councillor Adams said about applying the sustain or demonstrably applying, I think I'm putting the demonstrably word in your mouth, Councillor Adam, but demonstrably applying the sustainable powers principles across wider decision making, not just cabinet, and because the leader has assured us that those principles are applied at cabinet level.
All I would say is, in listening, you could combine 7 with 2. They carry very much the same sort of ethos, co-design, early stages, evidence base, etc. And given the fact that we placed a key importance on both the business case and the 5 case model you talk about, and then the project plan and the team. Both of those are sat inside of one. So I suppose in reflecting whether one is better divided into two, one is business case, one is proper project team with 4-dimensional input. And then 2 and 7 get merged, which is, ensuring that sustainable hours principles are applied to the above. And then you're dealing there with the council-wide issues.
Okay.
That arise from looking at this particular case study.
So I'm wondering, Chair, given the time factor now, if everybody's happy with the wording and the broad sense of the recommendations we've got there, would it be acceptable if ourselves as chairs work with our officers just to break them up into the right paragraphs, as it were, but retaining the element and ethos behind what we're saying? Would that be acceptable to our scrutiny officers as well? Yeah, we got some time. You're happy with that, Gareth? Yeah.
No.
Gareth, have you got a suggestion to make?
I've got a suggestion. I think there's one thing that we haven't covered. I agree with Councillor Angela's suggestion there, because we don't want to end up with a camel, is that the distinction was made early on with regard to this programme, was that it was an operational matter because it all flowed from £105,000 saving. But mission creep and whatever have you, it turned into something quite more profound.
Yes.
If we'd adopted robust project management principles, there would have been a review of the business case. And what I'd like to see in this, as part of project management, the thing that the senior responsible officer can do can escalate. An escalation means if an operational matter has changed so much and with so much risk attached to it, particularly around reputational risk, it would be the requirement that the SRO elevates that and escalates it to the cabinet for them to get involved in it where appropriate. So what I'm saying, something started out an operational matter can morph into something much more fundamental, which may need to be revisited by the cabinet.
Yeah. So Gareth, I think that ought to be captured in number 1.
Yes.
Which is about the 5 case model, and then formal governance and project management framework.
Yeah.
And that, because if there was a robust project management framework, that SRO escalation to the highest authority,
yes, should
be part and parcel of that, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
So on that, Councillor Angela's suggestion that we finalise these, the Democratic Services team have advised that we need to read out number 3 and number 4 in public, so that we can sign them off formally. So I'm going to just read them and seek views quite quickly, because we are over. So number 3 is future service reviews and transformation projects should incorporate benchmarking and learning from other local authorities, professional networks and relevant external experts where available, with lessons learned formally captured and applied to future service transformation projects. That one feels very yes to me. If our colleagues contend, it sounds like it's good practice, and I think it takes the learning from this particular episode to the wider ongoing performance of the whole council. Number 4 is the council should analyse the impact of service changes on vulnerable residents, particularly assisted collection users and digitally excluded residents, to ensure full service reviews include consideration of how any disproportionate impacts can be identified, monitored and mitigated. Yeah. Again, I would fully support that, because it's also part of our statutory responsibilities for equality. Yeah. So is everyone supportive of 3 and 4 as well? Yeah, fine. Kath, Gemma, Carrie-Anne, can you give us a check on have we conducted business as is required of us? Is there anything we have overlooked in terms of process and governance?
as far as I can see, Chair, no, everything is sound, and you've completed the discussion on the report, and you've gone through recommendations, and all of the committee members are in agreement. Or are all the committee members in agreement? Can they verbalise that or show hands? And you can formally go towards closing meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll close. Councillor Angela, I'll say something, and I'll give you a brief opportunity to close on your own behalf. But from my perspective, I would like to thank committee members from both committees for their attendance and for the seriousness and the level of maturity that has been demonstrated in discussion today. As chair of GAC, it's been a privilege to chair this meeting, and I would also like to thank all of the other attendees, whether council members and senior officers, for the work that's gone into preparing for today, and for the mature and professional way that answers have been addressed today. And thank you very much to everyone involved. I want to pass over to Councillor Angela to formally close, but I can see Councillor Richard Church's hand is up, so I'll just give Councillor Richard a word, and then I'll pass to Councillor Angela to formally close.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to express my thanks to the committee for the work you've done this afternoon. You have done a very thorough job, and I have found the meeting actually quite fascinating and enlightening. And I think that the recommendations that you have made are very thorough. I think some of them have implications beyond the Waste Management Service across the council. And I look forward to us seriously considering them and reporting back to both of your committees on them in the future. So thank you very much for your work this afternoon.
Thank you, Councillor Richard. Angela, you can have the last word.
Oh, bless you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I just want to thank the committee members from ERC and from GAC for their active involvement in this. I want to thank especially Ashley and John. Self-reflection is never easy, and this has been a particularly difficult one for you with such a public-facing service. But I thank you both for coming today, for answering honestly and being willing to take on the chin, as it were, I won't say criticism, because that's not what we're here, but the critical friend role that we're here to play. And obviously as ERC, we look forward to working with you in the future and seeing the service improve as time goes on. I also want to thank the backroom staff who we couldn't do without, who are working away trying to make sense of our ramblings and mumbled, and thank Matt as well for coming along as director. So yeah, and Lynn, thank you very much for excellent chairing of a difficult meeting.
Thanks, Councillor Angela. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I think we're done. Thank you. Out into the sunshine.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you.